Hey guys, welcome to the fourth episode of the Statist Podcast. I'm Julian.
I'm Cameron.
And before we start, we would really appreciate it if you guys could like the video and subscribe to our channel, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So this episode will mainly be about the election coverage in between last episode and now. We've had a lot of things going on this week, and generally I think we kind of agree that it's kind of been a slower news week.
Extremely slow.
Or at least for us it seemed that way. Maybe we're just completely wrong. But I wanted to start out with the first primary that was in between last episode and today, and that was South Carolina's Democratic primary. And as predicted, of course, we saw Hillary absolutely crush Bernie Sanders with a 73.5 to 26% victory.
I guess that's what I get, because last episode I was really optimistic about it.
No,
I really thought we were going to pull through, but...
I mean, to a certain degree, I could understand your optimism, but at the same time, I mean, looking at all the polling up to that point, it did not look good for him. Which, looking at the polling after the primary, we really kind of saw what was the big factor, and that was the African American vote. I was reading an article from Huffington Post, and it stated that this year exit polls showed black voters made up 61% of the electorate in the state. Clinton won 84% of that vote, and she also outdid Obama in 2008 in South Carolina on the African American vote. So that was the main thing that contributed to her victory in South Carolina. And overall, she picked up 39 delegates, whereas Bernie Sanders picked up 14. And if you can find the article, that Huffington Post article did really well of kind of laying out what both campaigns did in South Carolina. Hillary, it seemed, from what they documented from the get-go, moved to South Carolina. She just knew that this was going to be a key battleground state. Obviously, from her experience from the 2008 election, she did different town halls, she did different speaking events. She really put in a lot of effort into that state. Bernie put in a fair amount of effort. He had a lot of people on the ground, more so than Hillary, as odd as that is. However, he was less personal with the state, it seemed. But one of the things that I kind of looked at was, well, why did Hillary win the African American vote? Mm-hmm. Because, again, this was the deciding factor, no question, and among other things like, the low voter turnout. And looking at it demographic-wise, Bernie kept his lead with millennials, and I think he even kept his lead with white voters. But so afterwards, I was really starting to think about, well, why did she win the African American vote? Because overall, I think when it comes to issues, I still, people out there disagree, and I think the numbers really aren't on any of our sides, but I think we would agree that Bernie has a better position than Hillary when it comes to stuff like racial justice. And just putting that aside for a second, I think that was the key to why Bernie lost here. Hillary and Bernie had a very focused, I guess, very heavily, their campaigns focused very heavily on racial justice. And yeah, that is a big deal with the African American community in general. So they kind of had to, but I think ultimately whenever you have two campaigns focusing so heavily on racial justice reform and racial justice issues, then at that point it's like as if there's not much daylight in between them. So at that point, that's where people, I think, defer to things like name recognition, which Clinton has obviously had, who is more active within that state, which, again, among certain reports, we get Clinton was at least the most directly active within that state. And so I think that's mainly what contributed to her getting that demographic. I think ultimately, if I was in the Bernie Sanders campaign, I would want to focus on the differences, of course. The differences with single payer healthcare, universal education, and I realize that would be that follows the narrative of mostly what he's doing, but I think at that point you start to change the narrative a bit. You're focusing on racial justice. I think that, no question that is a key focus. However, there was something I just kind of was watching Larry Wilmore, the nightly show, and they had Al Sharpton on. Whether you disagree with him or not, there was one thing that he said that really caught what I felt was correct whenever you are looking to get the African American demographic. And that is not what the racial justice issues are. It's how African Americans would be affected by any policy, which I find kind of ironic because Al Sharpton didn't endorse Bernie. But I think if Bernie were to focus on, hey, obviously racial justice is a problem. Me and Hillary, we have a lot of daylight. We have very few daylight in between those issues. But let me show you where we don't. Let me show you where we are very different and how this could affect the community in general.
Hillary Clinton doesn't care about racial equality. She doesn't. The same person who won South Carolina and stole the African American vote is the same person 2 decades ago who called them super predators and said that we need to bring them to heel.
Yeah.
She's going up against a man who marched with Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, and
it's hard for me to comprehend. I've never been able to understand this. This is a confliction I've been having with myself. How does Hillary win that?
Again, I think overall it's because, again, both of the campaigns focus so heavily on racial justice and criminal justice reform.
Oh, bullshit. Hillary Clinton's she's following in Bernie's footsteps.
Even if you think she's disingenuous personally, her campaign followed that narrative.
They follow that narrative, but... Are we really going to say that that's what they actually believe?
Oh, yeah, no. And I mean, again, I think to a certain degree, I even believe that she is a little bit disingenuous when it comes to that thing. My whole thing is with her, I cannot claim to know what she's thinking because she is a politician in the sense of, she licks her finger and, she puts her finger up in the air and whatever the wind blows inside the political climate, that's what she follows. Mm-hmm. So... I get where you're coming from, but me personally, I just can't pin that to her yet. Again, I think the reason why she won that, though, is because, again, you're focusing on an issue where there's not much in between them. Mm-hmm. So, again, then the voters defer to name recognition. They defer to who is active within the state, and she was very active. Again, policy-wise, within that... point, you could talk about how you could, not believe her that she will carry out her agenda, but she laid out her agenda, and it's very close to Bernie Sanders. What Bernie, in my opinion, needed to do was to make the difference of how are the rest of my policies going to affect the African American community. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that could have easily shot him in the foot because, again, the community is very focused on these issues. And I'm not saying like they shouldn't be. I mean, we have stories like Sandra Bland. We have all these stories where African Americans are being basically killed by the police. Yeah. And so, I understand why they focus so heavily on that as a community. But at the same time, I think as a campaign, Bernie was in a very good position. And again, I'm not criticizing too much because I understand you have to put your resources in certain places. And Hillary had already sunk so many of her resources into there to where maybe the Sanders campaign realized if we were to sink X amount so much, we would lose in other places. So I understand, strategically speaking, I'm putting all of that aside when I say this because I obviously don't know that much when it comes to that sort of stuff. But there was a lot of talking points that he used during the debates where he pointed out on African American unemployment and how his campaign would help that. Obviously, education, that's always been a big deal for the African American community and how that's been affected onto things like poverty and all of that. So again, I think ultimately, I wish Bernie made those ties, but at the same time, I don't know if that still would have won him South Carolina.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of odd to see Hillary get the African American vote. However, there was something really telling that I saw in the article. And it was just a small little quote, but I thought it was pretty interesting. They asked a woman who campaigned for Hillary in '08, I guess, the political climate in South Carolina. And she said, well, people were so invested on voting for the first black president in '08. Mm-hmm. This time around, they're focused on voting for the first woman president. You know, for political junkies like you and me, and for people listening, we understand that that's
not the way to vote.
Yeah, it's more important because there are such big differences when it comes to policy. All of us understand that. But to the low, and again, I've always kind of thought this, and I've heard a lot of people say this, the election usually is dependent on low information voters. Because many people, for one, are already apathetic to politics. Then there's people who just do not have the time for it. Then that means that they're subjected to mainstream media narrative, which we know we cannot trust when it comes to being non-biased towards Bernie. And again, I think ultimately, again, it's just a quote from one person. It's all anecdotal. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. I know I did, but I find that very telling that people are still subjected to that reasoning of I'm going to vote for Hillary because of progress. The way I put it, progress on paper. Mm-hmm. We're not delving into what's written on the paper, but is on paper that seems like progress.
Yeah.
Which I might, you know, just in passing, I would like to add, we never saw that with Obama, though. We never saw Obama pull out the race card. As much as Republicans will say he pulled out he never did. We never saw Obama say, vote for me because I will be the first black president. And it would be one thing to say, well, if people were thinking that and Hillary didn't do that at all, I would at least give Hillary some credit in that sector. But she does.
All the time.
Yeah, every when they asked, I remember one interview specifically, I think it was with Chuck Todd from MSNBC. Or it might have been, I mean, I think she said it in all the ones I've seen. But they asked, how are you more progressive than Bernie? And she will say, well, I'm more progressive in the sense of I will be the first woman president. When that's obviously not the question.
Narrative.
Yeah, it's an art.
Who was it? Was it Madeleine Albright that said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
Yeah,
okay.
But at the same time, she had always said that she was just bringing that up again.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where clearly they're asking you on policy, mm-hmm. and Hillary knows that.
Yeah.
It's an artful dodge. She likes to call Bernie for saying artful, quote unquote, artful smears. She likes to do artful dodges, and that is one of the key dodges she does. And so, just to point out, I guess on character, is it's not the same whenever somebody says, oh, I voted for Obama in '08 because I wanted to vote for the first black president. Obama, as much as, I mean, it was obvious that would come true. That is not the narrative he tried to set for his campaign.
He talked about the issues.
And you know, I'm not a big fanboy of Obama, but that's just the truth. He didn't really rely on that at all. I don't even remember him relying on it at all. I mean, there might have been a few rare instances, but Hillary has sunk really heavily, or at least moderately, into that talking point. But anyway, that was the South Carolina one, and as we predicted, obviously after that, the mainstream media kind of started to criticize Sanders on, well, is he good for African Americans? And again, I think we also kind of covered on how he is in many ways better. You just have to move past the racial criminal justice reform issues. Like I said, as obviously as important it is, I think Bernie Sanders' policy affects African American communities in the most positive and gives them the most benefits. But moving on into Super Tuesday, that was the narrative that the mainstream media kept, that Bernie was at this point on the ropes, which I would agree to a certain, not as much as them. But let's go state by state here. So in Virginia, we had Clinton win with 64.3% of the vote to Bernie's 35.2%. Clinton, of course, picked up 61 delegates to Sanders' 32. And this was one of those where the polling indicated that she was going to win. And you'll see that along with the other polling. Moving on to Georgia, where she won 71.3% to Bernie's 28.2, picking up 72 delegates, where Bernie picked up 28. And we're continuing along the South with Tennessee. She won 66.1 to Bernie's 32.4, as well as Arkansas 66.3, 29.7. Alabama 77.8 to 19.2. I don't know if this happened to you, but as the South was obviously getting in those votes and Hillary was winning, my phone was blowing up with people saying, "Oh no, she's killing him."
No, but no, in reality, we're looking at all these states, and it all makes sense because they are deeply red states, and these are states that are not going to matter in the general election. Well, so big fucking whoop. She picked up some delegates from southern states, but it's not over yet.
Yeah,
it's only beginning.
And what I was telling people that day is, I remember one specific person texted me, and they were like, she's killing him. This might be over after today. And I was telling him, no, this is actually all according to plan. If we looked at the polls, she was winning these states. She ended up winning Virginia, Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, Alabama, and Tennessee. And these were all states, again. Oh, and she did end up picking Massachusetts, which was supposed to go for Bernie, but it wasn't a big win. I mean, if we look at the delegate count, she only picked up one delegate. It's pretty much a tie. Would it have been better if Bernie won the majority? Yes. I said it before going into Super Tuesday that I felt he needed to win 4 to at least keep it a good race. If he'd won 5, then it's gonna be neck to neck within the coming weeks and months. But I mean, overall, it wasn't a huge loss as mainstream media, and I feel as some low information voters are making it out to be. It's not the end of the world, people. I mean, he picked up a good amount of delegates. I think the final count so far, just with cold delegates alone, Bernie has about 412 and Hillary has about 457. That's according to Wikipedia, which we looked up before the show. So according to that one source, that's what we're looking at, and I don't think that's really that bad for the state. No,
we're looking at it, and it's already neck and neck. This is a really tight race so far.
Yeah, and I mean, granted, we're not counting the superdelegates.
Because, superdelegates are known to fluctuate between each candidate according to the popular vote. So
yeah, and I mean,
superdelegates are nothing to worry about right now.
Yeah, and we're not saying completely disregard them; they're irrelevant. They're not. I mean, there are going to be these superdelegates within the Democratic Party who are obviously going to cling to Hillary because she is establishment, and that's the establishment wing of the party. But for the most part, say if Bernie was to have a huge surge throughout the month and he was to have the majority, I think we would start seeing people switch over to Bernie Sanders. And so that superdelegate, as much as it is kind of important, at the same time, it's very dependent on the number of cold delegates that they receive.
Yeah.
Which, in another story, Massachusetts.
Yeah. There's been some controversy from Massachusetts saying that Bill Clinton has violated election laws, which, I mean, pretty much the rundown of it is Massachusetts prohibits the solicitation of votes for or against a candidate or party or position within 150 feet of a polling place. And everybody there claimed that he was not soliciting for votes or soliciting against any kind of votes. Apparently, he came in there, thanked the poll workers, kissed an old lady on the forehead, and posed for some pictures. Cool, whatever. I'm fine with that. And like I said, a lot of people said he wasn't soliciting. However, I do know, because I've came across this photo on Facebook several times, and he was posing with a man who had a ballot in his hands. And that is a violation of the election laws in Massachusetts. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and speculate, but
Well, I mean, to a certain degree, I think there was. I mean, obviously, this was a calculated plan by the Clinton campaign to send him in, and again, the old politics saying, "Shake the hands and kiss the babies." I think that was an obvious calculated move on their part because, again, Massachusetts was going to be one of those kind of swing states for this primary. And that was going to be a Bernie state for the most part. And that was the other good thing about this. Bernie picked up most of the 3 of the 4 swing states for this, for Super Tuesday. He also won Vermont, which that's his home ground. He wasn't going to lose that. But I think they sent Clinton there because they knew that this was going to be one of the states where it was a swing state, but it was also one that they could win. So I think it was a calculated move, and whenever these moves are made, there are going to be little open spots to where they can violate some laws. Ultimately, I don't know unless there's some account that we haven't read up on online about him soliciting. Ultimately, I haven't seen that evidence. If it is out there and it is credible, then yeah, I think he voted. Yeah. I think he broke some laws there, and there should be I don't even know what the penalty would be if that were to come to pass. I mean, again, it would be one of those things where it would essentially be a slap on the wrist, especially whenever you put in the mainstream media. Now, Fox News, they would have a field day with it, but that would be about it.
Yeah,
and so I mean, it's one of those things where I wish we did kind of have a media who were looking more heavily into this, but at the same time, I don't see it going really anywhere. But it is interesting nonetheless, and again, this should show you that they at least are, that if you are volunteering, or if you're donating, or if you're any way invested in the Bernie Sanders campaign, you do not let up. Because they are still around their table trying to figure out how to make these cold, calculated moves to get last-minute votes. Mm-hmm. So, and I know as a Bernie supporter, it's one of those things where we're not going to give up until the man gets the nomination.
Yeah, and we're going to ride through all the way through the convention.
Yeah, so. But to anybody who's thinking that they could take a little break, or there's a little bit of breathing room. This is proof that that's not going to happen anytime in between now and the nomination. The Clinton machine is going to be continually thinking about what they could do to better their chances in these states that are really neck and neck. And for the most part, that's a lot of these liberal states, or a lot of these swing states. Red states, not so much. But again, Bernie has a high appeal, and again, that makes sense. He's to the left of her. And whenever Democrats and liberals think of their ideal candidate, they want somebody who is to the left of the establishment. But yeah, and again, there was also some key endorsements that Bernie picked up. Mm-hmm. I believe you had a list of those.
Right before South Carolina, I know that he picked up Robert Reich, who was the former labor secretary to the Clinton administration. He endorsed Bernie Sanders, and Robert Reich has known Hillary Clinton since she was 19 years old. Yeah. So that's surprising. He's coming out and saying, hey, Bernie Sanders.
Well, I mean, if you've ever, I've read very little of Robert Reich. What the main book I've wanted to read for a while, and I'm still waiting.
Inequality for All.
Well, no. Saving Capitalism. His kind of
capitalism for the many, not the few.
Yeah, his theory on how we could save capitalism by putting a good divide of socialism into our economy in certain sectors, of course. And how that would overall actually save capitalism. Mm-hmm. Again, if I've ever talked to anybody who's listening about if I've ever been asked, or if I've ever talked to anybody on a generality sort of basis, sort of principle, I believe in a hybrid system. I believe that we could have capitalism and socialism. It just depends on where. Mm-hmm. And so that's why again, just reading the synopsis and the summary of that book, that's always kind of gravitated me towards Robert Reich. I obviously still have to read it to get all the substance.
Yeah, I have to.
Definitely.
But this one was actually a really surprising one, and this is actually really good news. Representative Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii. She stepped down as the DNC's vice chair to endorse Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And the DNC has warned her not to do that. But she did it anyway, and that's really good news for us. It's a bigger deal than what everybody thinks it is.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, because I think also what this election has, for me personally, whenever I started looking into politics, which I would probably say would be about a year ago, whenever I started to heavily look into it. I mean, I always knew my basics, what the Republicans were for and what the Democrats were for, but I started looking heavily into it. And whenever I started, I understood that there were these establishment figures behind our system that controlled it, that through our legislative branch really channeled all of their influence to pass very crucial things that would affect their profit motives, and etc. And what this election, or I guess I should say the Democratic primary, has shown me is that these establishment figures run deeper than what I initially looked up. Whenever I was looking up into things, it was these millionaires and billionaires, and a few of these congressmen and senators. But really looking at this campaign, I remember I would continually get the emails from Debbie Wasserman Schultz asking me to become a card-carrying Democrat. And it seemed attractive to me at the time. Again, at the time, even now, I didn't agree with the Democrats 100%, but I was like, okay, this is the closest I'm going to get to somebody who represents my views. And I'm glad I didn't, because...
And that's the way the Communist Party of America also feels. In case anybody knew, they came out and endorsed Hillary Clinton.
Which
is crazy.
I find that odd.
It's very odd, but
yeah.
that's a story for another time.
No, but what this primary has showed me is that the Democratic establishment runs deeper than what I had ever just saw on the surface. Again, we see Debbie Wasserman Schultz very much, in my opinion, having a bias, it seems, by default to Hillary. And that's another story, looking back into her roots and how she's connected to Hillary Clinton. But there was also, I briefly wanted to kind of talk on this. Elizabeth Warren set up a committee that basically looked into credit card fraud. Whenever credit cards would say, we're going to give you consumer protection. That's the way they would always word it, consumer protection. It sounds amazing, but they would basically be charging extra amounts for nothing. Mm-hmm. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the DNC have started investigating Elizabeth Warren's committee that basically investigated those people and said, well, what kind of services are you offering? If you're not offering any services, then you're not going to be charging whatever extra amount that they were charging. And there were even some cases where they found explicitly that these people were overcharging, so to the consumer, they actually got rebates from these credit card companies after they were exposed by Warren's committee. And again, why is the DNC going after this? I mean, and that's just one instance, and even then, I haven't looked 100% into it. But again, what this election has showed me is that that there is a very strong Democratic Party establishment, mm-hmm. and as much as they're not as bad as the Republicans, they are still status quo, and they have very much created the political climate that has led to the rise of Bernie Sanders, which I think is a good thing, but they've also led to the climate of Donald Trump.
Yep.
Along with the Republican establishment. Yeah. But it's a really interesting race, and to view all of these dynamics, it's going to continue to be interesting. But we also wanted to touch a little bit on Super Tuesday for the Republicans. And Well, Donald Trump ran shop on those primaries and on those elections. He won. It was about 7 states, right?
Roughly.
Yeah,
7 states.
And then Cruz picked up 1. He picked up Minnesota. Oh no, sorry. Cruz picked up 3, and Rubio picked up Minnesota.
Yes.
Which, man, and before that, Donald Trump was, basically getting attacked for David Duke's, I guess, endorsement of him. Mm-hmm. And man, there's nothing that could stop him, in my opinion.
No.
I do not see anything to stop him. I think I was watching some TYT coverage, and they joked and they said the only thing that could probably stop Donald Trump is Donald Trump scrubbing up and performing an abortion on live TV. And even then, it probably wouldn't stop him.
I have no hope in conservatives or people who are voting for Donald Trump. I'm pretty sure he could just do the most raunchy shit on TV, and they'd be like, no, this is what I like about him. He speaks his mind. He does what he wants. This is good for America. This is how we're going to negotiate with China, Julian.
No, but to be fair, I mean, I think Donald Trump knows what he's doing with the KKK thing. A lot. I mean, I'm obviously not agreeing with it, because my whole thing is I don't think it might be indicative on Trump, but I think what Trump is playing into here is those people who say, well, I'm just criticizing X and I get called a racist and I get called a bigot. And I think, and it stands on a case-by-case basis if that is true. I'm not saying all of those are untrue, but there are a lot of people out there that would feel that applies to them, that they're not a racist and a bigot, but because they criticize certain things, they are called that. And I think that's what Trump is playing into it, especially with this KKK, David Duke endorsement. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he's playing into, man. I think he's permanently, or I think he's, not permanently, I think he's very calculating in not condemning them. I think he's doing it on purpose. Okay. To kind of, again, rally up these sort of sympathies of, well, he doesn't have to condemn them. And in many ways, I think I kind of even agree with that. I think if you were to indict anything, if you were to take away anything from this one story, it's that anytime the KKK would endorse anybody and they were not to condemn them, that would be political suicide. But with Donald Trump, it's not.
Oh, he's good at marketing.
Yeah,
he's good at selling his campaign.
But and again, I think it's the Republican establishment, it's the Democratic establishment. Both of these play into the rise of people like Trump, where people are obviously pissed off. People are looking for change in any which way. They just want something to shake up the status quo. And with the Republicans, it's something to the extreme right. And with Democrats, it's at least 50-50. Because Bernie Sanders
is a true leftist.
Well, yeah, Bernie is a true leftist, but he's not getting the same amount of reception as Trump is getting. I mean, I'm not saying he's getting terrible, but I mean, imagine if Bernie was running as good as Trump is.
Oh, right God. I think he would be doing just as well as Trump is doing right now.
Yeah, but again, I think the base is still a little... They're a little out on the... What's the word? They're still out for the decision on whether or not they're as pissed off as their Republican base. But again, I think what Trump is playing into... Again, I think the dude is terrible policy-wise. And even the things that the small little sound bites he will say that I do agree with, like bombing ISIS's...
oil fields.
Yeah, oil fields, and how he's kind of indicated for single payer. Even though I've seen recent stories recently that
I kind of looked into that, and it's pretty much just ruthless capitalism in the healthcare. It's like completely privatized.
I feel like there are a few issues where he does have to run back because the base will get pissed off. whenever, and I think that because if you look at his earlier interviews, he did indicate pretty much what would be to single payer. Now this is one of those issues he has to bring it back.
Because Republicans are like, wait, that sounds really familiar.
Yeah. And we saw this with Planned Parenthood. At one point, he said Planned Parenthood does so many things for women and all of that, but at the end of it, he has to pull it, but he has to reel it back in and say, but I would still close them down. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that even is like an artful dodge by his part as well. But that's my point, is he's able to do these things that has had the Republican base pissed off for so long that the establishment is not doing, even to a certain extent the Tea Party's not doing. And he has basically channeled all of that frustration into a campaign. I mean, today we saw Mitt Romney coming out against him. I don't think it's going to affect him one bit. Mm-mm. It might affect him again with those...
No, he's going to come out, he's going to be like, this guy was a loser.
No.
This guy was a loser. Why should anybody listen to him? He's a loser.
Before I left out of my house today, I actually caught his response. Mm-hmm. A part of it. The one thing that stood out to me, again, because with Trump...
Was that a little bit half true?
A little bit half true.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No. With what Trump was saying was... Because at the beginning of the race, Mitt Romney did look like he was going to come in, because Mitt Romney has been coming in since 2008 and running, but he ended up not. Smart. I would say that was a smart decision on his part, but Trump was saying because he was scared of Donald Trump. The one thing that I remember, because whenever I hear Donald Trump speak, there's not much substance there, so I obviously cling to the most entertaining sort of...
He has the vocabulary of a 12-year-old.
Well, yeah, but like what I cling to from all of his speeches is like the entertaining stuff that he'll say. And one of the things that he said today was Mitt Romney was on... If I had the choice, I could tell Mitt Romney to get on his knees. And again, man, nothing's gonna stop this guy, in my opinion. Now, what Rubio has been trying to push forward is a brokered convention. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's basically the we view the superdelegates as like the establishment's like emergency button. If a populist candidate or an anti-establishment candidate gets so much support, we view the superdelegates as like they break the emergency glass, hit the button, and that's to help whoever they want. Now, again, I think initially that's what that was made to be. I don't think that's what it is now. But the brokered convention is, in my opinion, that literal emergency glass. What the brokered convention is they basically get the establishment wing of the party, and they just all kind of come together. And if there is a close enough, I forget which percentage it has to be, but it has to be very close between the two front runners, or I guess in this case it'd be three, because Rubio's the main one who's proposing this, that they would do something to where they decide on who it is. And obviously they would decide on the establishment candidate. Yeah. But I think now, of course, as of right now, Trump, if we look at the top three, Trump has 319 delegates, Cruz has 226, and Rubio has 110. So all of these, and there's Kasich and Carson, but Kasich has 25, Carson has 8. So we're not even focusing on them. But with those three, and of course we would have to see if going on into the rest of this month and the months continuing how he performs. There's going to be a big hiccup. By the way, I think there's going to be a big hiccup when it comes to Florida and Ohio. Mm-hmm. If he could take one of those, I mean, the nails already are in the coffin, but I think that would be one of the final ones. And if he gets both, it's over, I think. But anyway, it's looking still very positive for him. It still looks well. And my whole thing is, there's nothing that's going to stop him. The brokered convention, they would implode the party. If Trump does as well as he's continued to do, they would implode the party by saying the base, obviously, the consensus is out on the base and they want Trump, but it's not as close to where the brokered convention could be justifiable to the base without the base getting pissed off.
Yeah.
And then Trump even though he said he wouldn't, recently he has kind of also hinted that he would go third party again.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that they would do it. So again, I mean, we came to this conclusion last time that Trump was pretty much untouchable and unstoppable. I still think he is. And of course, the establishment, just like the Democratic establishment, is going to find every sort of way to kill him off or try to find killing blows for his campaign. I just don't think it will happen. What do you think?
I can agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're gonna go ahead and try to put him in his corner. I don't know. I don't think they're gonna go ahead and try to sabotage this.
Yeah. And again, I think they want to.
No, absolutely. Of course they want to, but I mean, Trump just has so much momentum.
Yeah, he has so much grassroots support. So like I said, I think it would implode the party. All right, so looking forward, like I said, I think I briefly touched on it with the Republicans. Look for Donald Trump. I think he's even looking positive going into Saturday. From some of the polls I've seen. I
think it's safe to say right now he's the nominee.
Well, yeah, but again, we have to look at his performance leading up throughout this month, and I think he's looking pretty positive this Saturday. With the Democrats, again, just I know for most of our listeners, they're probably following the Democratic race, and they rightly should be, but just don't get discouraged with the mainstream narrative. I mean, again, this isn't the most ideal of scenarios. The ideal scenario is that Bernie would have won 5 states and maybe he would have won Nevada. That would be pretty damn good. But it's not the worst. It's not like he won 1 state in Super Tuesday. He picked up 3 very key states, and of course he picked up Vermont. He's still in the fight. So I don't think anybody's worrying about breathing a sigh of relief.
I mean, the race is basically only 10% over. We still got a long way to go before the convention.
And he's looking very positive coming up this Saturday as well. Some of the polls I've seen, he's actually winning the majority of the states. Again, these polls are really, I would say that I wouldn't get them from super reliable sources, so take that with a grain of salt. I haven't been able to see really the sources I frequent giving me a good amount of polls yet, so but we'll see. And I think that it's still overall up in the air. You shouldn't be breathing a sigh of relief if you're for Bernie, but you definitely shouldn't be giving up.
But you should expect Clinton to take the South.
Oh yeah.
And we are going to dominate on the West Coast and the Northwest Coast and the Northern.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be good from here on out.
If it's not domination, it's definitely going to be close, and definitely closer than indicated. All right. So I know that this was probably one of the shorter episodes we've had. Again, I've been working since last episode. I think I've had every day on, so it's been a little bit tiring for me, and overall it's been kind of a slow week. Next episode, hopefully if we are to see a decision on the Supreme Court's HB2 come in, we'll probably talk about that. There's also a small privacy bill that's, I guess, within the Supreme Court. I don't know. I follow Edward Snowden, and I barely saw those tweets today, so I'm probably going to look into that when I get home. But yeah, again, sorry it was one of the shorter episodes, guys, but this is all I feel like we really saw between last episode and this.
Next week I am going to try. You want to try for the next episode?
For what?
Go ahead and have that guest on.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think we might have multiple guests on, actually.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because one guest that we're looking to have on has been doing a lot of research into the Supreme Court's HB2 decision, and again, so I think they're going to want to be on for that. If there is a decision, then there probably will be made by that time.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, we're going to have a debate coming up. We're still working on who to find, but we're going to go ahead and have a debate in one of the next upcoming episodes, and yeah, stay tuned for that.
I'd say discussion. I'm not.
Well, okay, it's a civil discussion. It's not gonna get heated. It's not gonna get angsty, because
I know me personally, I'm not like an expert to where I could be like, I will debate. But, well, I mean, it's a discussion of ideas. And
we're just going to discuss the issues,
Yeah.
pretty much. That's all it's going to be.
And so hopefully, that would also engage some more viewers and all of that.
You want to talk about DSA?
Oh, yeah, DSA. Well, I've talked to the regional organizer that's helping me start up the chapter here, and it's looking pretty good right now. We're still setting up the basic things, but as I would say in probably about a month's time, we might have our first event. Which again, if you're looking to join, just either get a hold of me or Cameron, and we'll get you set up and everything. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that might interest some of you guys, and if it does, it does, and if it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Alrighty, well, this has been the 4th episode of The Statist. Go ahead and like and subscribe and check us out on Facebook. Thank you, guys.
All right. See you guys later.